seconds to make sure that we're broadcasting out to the world. We are live here, all from I think Lisa and I are in our home offices, and Tim is still braving it. Are you at the office, Tim, or are you at your home office?
Absolutely. Office.
You are essential.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for that validation, Jared.
That's what everybody tells you. You are essential. So you guys, if you're just joining us, this is our extension of our conversation about how the C.A.R.E.S Act takes care of you. Today, we are talking specifically about stimulus checks, stimulus money. When should you expect it? Is it taxable? We're answering your questions, so please be sure to post those in the comments. We'll make sure that we're monitoring that and making sure that we get those answered. But before we dive into stimulus money and stimulus checks, Tim, I wanted to check in with you in regards to our conversation last week. We were talking about the PPP, which is the Payroll Protection Plan or Program?
Program,
okay. 50-50 shot. And we've seen all over the place. I started seeing the alerts come in last night that the money was almost gone, $349 billion. That it was almost all accounted for. And then I think I just saw an alert come through that said, yep, it's out. So are those correct? What do you know about that? And what do you think we should see in the future?
Yeah, the SBA announced that as of 5 hours ago, they are out of funds. They have accepted over 1.5 million applications for the $349 billion and processed those. What remains to be seen is if you submitted it a week ago, if you submitted it 10 days ago, that kind of thing, is your application being processed and you just haven't heard, or are you going to, you're too late to the game and you're going to be getting some sort of a belayment or denial in the near future? So, but as of now, if you have not submitted, they say that they're out of money. Now, we also heard that Congress is considering an extension of that proposal in the form of an additional $250 billion to be considered. Right now, as of today, Thursday, so this is how quickly these things are changing, the Senate left chambers without any type of resolution or vote on the $250 billion. The Democrats and the Republicans are at odds as to what constitutes the next round of economic stimulus. The Democrats apparently want another $250 billion, 150 for hospitals or local governments, and $100 billion for governments, as well as an expansion of the food stamps program. So that's the holdup right now, that the Senate Republicans only want the $250 billion extension of the PPP program on a standalone basis. So they couldn't come to agreement today. They've left for the weekend, and they will take that up again.
Isn't it Wednesday and they left for the weekend?
Today's Thursday, Jared, but yes.
It all feels like the weekend. Okay, well, still, it's Thursday and they're gone for the weekend. It feels like a constant weekend right now.
That's exactly right. So in Washington, D.C., as of about, I guess it's an hour ago, they knocked off for the week, which means they won't be until tomorrow. And then Monday morning, Washington time, Washington, D.C. time, they will pick up the arguing again.
Okay, and so if I was a small business, let's say I banked with Wells Fargo, for example, and I heard that Wells Fargo had some trouble. I mean, I know that all of the banks had issues with the amount of loan applications that they were receiving and just handling all of this influx at once. So let's say I'm with a bank that wasn't able to get my application processed quick enough. Will I see anything, or do I have to wait for Congress or the Senate to come up with another plan?
Yeah, if you have not already applied, there is a chance that the second round you could be included. They are even contemplating, some members of Congress are contemplating even a third round. So it doesn't necessarily hurt if you want to take the couple of hours, 2-3 hours, whatever it is, to pull all your records together and still get the application in. But know that in the first round, you're done, you're host.
One more question in regards to PPP. So let's say I applied for the loan. This is something that a friend of mine said. I applied for the loan. I got it through my bank. My bank said that I was approved, but I haven't seen loan docs yet, or I haven't seen the money. So if the bank, your understanding, and maybe you don't know, if the bank said I was approved, did they set aside that money for me, or is it gone?
Again, they processed over 1.5 million applications. I guarantee there are tens or hundreds of thousands of applications that made it into the pipeline that will be approved, for which you haven't heard yet. So again, if you applied a week ago or 10 days ago or April 2nd, whatever it is, then you may have already been approved. You just don't know it yet. So I've heard two different things from various people. One is that my application has been accepted, which just means the bank said you got everything you needed to get to us, and we forwarded it on. And then I've heard a couple of people say that their bank has let them know that they've been approved, but they have not seen the documents, the loan documents back from the SBA yet. Of course, those are very two different stages in the process, right? Accepted versus approved. But to your answer, Jared, if you have been approved, your bank should be forwarding those loan documents to you in fairly short order.
Got it. Mike Hayes is joining us, and Mike said, since there may be, let me say that again, since there might not be any money coming, is there a downside to pulling money out of a 401k retirement account?
So 401k withdrawals, they're allowing kind of on a penalty-free basis. Even so, normal rules, if you're under 59 and a half, you get a 10% penalty for taking that money out. If you're over 59 and a half, they will tax you on it, but there'll be no penalty. And after, of course, 70 and a half or 72 now, new rules, you're required to take some money out. So no real downside other than you should be aware that you will be taxed on that money, combined with all your other income for 2020.
So that helps us roll right into this conversation about income, stimulus, stimulus payments, stimulus income. So is stimulus income taxable?
So the individual side of this $2.2 trillion, there's certainly many, many programs. So one we're going to talk about today is kind of what the IRS is calling the economic impact payment. Most people are calling it their stimulus checks. This is the program where they get up to $1,200 per individual and $500 per child as a direct payment, as a relief payment directly from the IRS. If you have been paying attention to the news, the IRS was very proud of themselves that starting last Saturday, deposits started happening into people's bank accounts. And I've been getting texts and emails and telephone calls saying that various people have been receiving those funds. So they're actually coming through. They're actually really happening. The criteria was, of course, that if you are a single individual and you're making $75,000 a year or less, or if you're married joint making $150,000 or less, then you were eligible to receive this $1,200 economic impact payment. If you claimed a dependent child, and IRS is now referring to that as age 17 or less, then you get an extra $500 for those dependents claimed on your income tax return. So if I was married joint with 3 kids, I could get $1,200 for me, $1,200 for my wife, $2,400 total, plus $500, presuming each one of those kids is 17 or younger. For those of you that have college-age kids, they may be more expensive than the other kids, 18 to 24, whatever it is. But they're saying that those guys don't count.
They don't count. They don't exist until you have to pay the tuition bill for the college that's not going on right now, right?
Amen, Lisa.
Yeah.
If you were a retiree and you didn't have to file a tax return, either the railroad retirement benefits or most people Social Security retirement benefits, you did not have to file a tax return in order to be able to get those payments. That they would use the information they already have in the Social Security Administration's database to do that. And I have heard from a couple of people that their elderly parents who aren't required to file tax returns have gotten those payments direct deposited into their accounts as well.
Because they have that information through the Social Security Administration.
That's
Got it. Okay.
So Social Security is great about direct depositing your Social Security. That's pretty much the only way that they prefer to do that. So it's been absolutely wonderful for the people that qualify, the people that make that. You do not have to, like I said, file a tax return and be able to get that. For the $1,200 deal, it was thought early on that if you owed the IRS, let's say that Lisa was a delinquent IRS person and owed the IRS $150,000, it was thought early on that they would take her $1,200 and apply it to her back debt. But the IRS has clarified that and says between now and July 15th, no collection activity, no offsets will take place. So they'll give you your $1,200 if you owe the IRS. The only thing that it looks like they will actually take your $1,200 and apply it is if you owe back child support. So if you owe that, then there's no way out. They'll say, here's your economic stimulus that you would have gotten, and we paid it toward your child support. Let's see, who gets it? Let's say I filed in 2018, but not in 2019. The IRS is supposed to look at the 2019 return if it's on file. If it's not, they will look toward the 2018 tax return. If you were required to file and you didn't file in 18 or 19, they said, hurry up and file. If you want your money, then you have to hurry up and file.
Got it.
They recommend that you do that electronically because the IRS also suspended the processing of their paper returns. So if you mail your paper return in, they won't even process it until probably August. And so, of course, your payment will be delayed as well. So do it electronically, do it quickly. Another scenario I've heard from a lot of people, let's say Jared made so much money that he owed in 2018 and he owed in 2019. So the IRS doesn't have his bank account information on file. They just uploaded, again, this is changing. So they've been promising it for about a week and a half. This morning, the IRS website was just updated with the filer payment information. So you can go online to the IRS website, click under the economic impact section, which is the portion of their coronavirus splash page. And you can actually input via a secure link your bank information and routing number so they know where to send your money.
And we will, I'll post that here in the comments too about exactly how to do that. I also saw that the IRS had created a way to see the status of your payment. Are you aware of that?
Yep, exactly right. Thank you for that segue.
Okay.
So you're absolutely right. So they have a Where's My Payment tab that you can click on, similar to the tools that they had available for Where's My Refund for regular tax filings or Where's My Amended Return to track the status of your amended return. They now have a Where's My Payment. They recommend that if you are just filing, that you wait 2 weeks before that thing becomes active. But if you filed your 2019 return at least 2 weeks ago, or you have not filed, at this point, it almost sounds like to get better information, it may be worth it to wait a couple of weeks to file your tax return for 2019 if you already haven't, to get the most up-to-date information about your $1,200.
Now, what if
and I am just posting that link right now in the live chat.
And then I had a question that came to me. In 2018, they had a different bank account, and than they do currently now. That bank account that they had in 2018, which the IRS has record of, is no longer an active account. So but they have not yet filed 2019. What would you recommend they do?
So like 30 seconds ago, jump onto the IRS's website and update your banking information to make sure that that doesn't go somewhere where it's not. Because if you've ever tried to get money from the IRS one time, it's hard enough. If you try and get it from them the second time, it's, cubed as hard.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool.
Hey, question in the chat. I think this is going back to our conversation about pulling money for your 401k retirement account.
Yeah.
Ricky says, I thought I heard that you would have an opportunity to pay back the retirement funds over 3 years.
That is true. That's part of the C.A.R.E.S Act. That is true for IRA money, not 401k money. So
Okay.
if you pull money out of your IRA, you can either choose to pay it back over 3 years, and therefore it's a non-taxable distribution. You can choose to spread the tax over a 3-year period, or you can choose to pay it all this year if you're like Jared, making so much money that you just got to send it in.
Well, now aren't IRAs?
Yeah, you know.
Oops, Jared was talking. I didn't hear you, Lisa.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say, aren't IRAs pre-taxed anyway? Aren't you putting funds into an IRA that's already pre-taxed?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because most of the time that's true. You put money into IRA, you get a deduction for the money going in. It grows tax deferred, and when you take it out, it's all taxable. You can also make non-deductible contributions into your IRA, and then you got to figure out what's taxable and what's non-taxable about the money that you put it out. Mm. Or let's say it's Roth, and if you've met that criteria already, i.e. held it for 5 years, that kind of thing, then withdrawals are not taxable at all. They would have been subject to a penalty, but not taxation, because Roths are generally not subject to taxation if you've held that in the account for at least 5 years.
Okay. All right.
Now, one of the things that I've seen going around on Facebook, which is an extremely reliable source, I get all of my news from Facebook, is a schedule of who receives their payments and when. So one of the things I saw was, if you made up to $20,000, you'll get your payment this week. If you made $30,000, you'll get it this week. If you make $40,000, you get it this week. Is there any truth to that? From what I'm hearing from friends of mine, it doesn't seem like there's truth to that. Or I was hearing, if your last name begins with this or your last name is that, you'll get it this week. Is there truth to any of that? I mean, what's the method? Do you know what the IRS's method is right now?
When the Treasury first started out, they said that they were going to try and get the money to the people that they deemed needing it first. So starting out with the lower incomers, $10,000 or $20,000, and then going up from there, thinking that those people would be the greatest impacted and therefore would need the money first. Let's use a very example that's close to home. Of our 15 employees, 2 have received their payments. And one is in the lower income tax bracket, and one is in a little higher income tax bracket, and they received it within about 3 hours of each other. Wow. And so it does not seem to be now on the last name thing. I hadn't heard the Treasury saying anything about that, but one gentleman, the lower earner, is starting with a last name of A, and the higher earner is starting with a last name of G. So maybe they're grouped close enough together to be able to do that. But I had not heard anything officially from the Treasury that they were going to group it by last name.
Now let's talk about, because I know on the conversation today, we've got a lot of people who are self-employed and a lot of small business owners. So if we're saying, okay, the PPP money is out and we're not sure where your EIDL, where that status is, and you made too much money in 2018, 2019, so you don't qualify for a stimulus payment, where do you land on that spectrum? You're
supposed to have all that money that you made, Jared, set aside to be able to weather this storm.
So going out and buying the Porsche and on that trip to Europe was not a good move.
Hopefully it held its value. So yeah, if you so of all the different programs out there that you can take advantage of, you may not be eligible for the and the great thing I heard the other day, I wish I could take credit for it, but I heard it from somebody else, is the reason they call it the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The reason that you pronounce it EIDL is because it just sits there and doesn't do anything.
Oh dear.
You made too much money. If you made, you're married and you made over $198,000 for both 18 and 19, you're not subject to the economic impact payment, that stimulus, individual stimulus. If you made over 99,000 as a single person, you're not eligible for that. If you're already haven't submitted for the PPP loan, we already talked about that. You're probably too late. So there's various other programs that are available, like the 401k withdrawal, or the 401k. The thing that we didn't talk about, Mike's question is, they will actually, under a 401k, allow you a loan as opposed to withdrawing the money that would be taxable. You can actually borrow the money from yourself and repay it within a 5-year period, and then it wouldn't be a taxable distribution. So that used to be limited to $50,000. They, as part of the C.A.R.E.S package, they expanded that to $100,000. So you could take up a $100,000 loan against your 401k. With the markets going crazy, it's probably a 201k now at this point, but you could take money out and use that. And again, you got up to 5 years to repay it without it being a taxable event, which is why I think they segregated the 401k and the IRA money withdrawals. Then various and sundry other programs out there, but those are the big ones for getting access to cash, especially within this very narrow, impact time.
Now, I know I see Michelle said we were talking about last name thing and stimulus payments. Michelle says was the last name for the state of Nevada unemployment. I know that I saw on the news that they were talking about if your last name falls between A and G, call on Monday and whatever. I don't know if that's, I think that that's probably what she's referring to, and I don't know how successful that's been on unemployment. I know we're talking about that next week. We're talking about unemployment benefits and all of that next week, but I don't think that's not where I heard it as far as stimulus payments go.
But that is true. So state of Nevada announced a couple of different programs, and not to steal thunder from next week's program, but they did a number of things getting them up to speed and helping them not be so overwhelmed. And one of them was exactly that. So it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday by last name, and then, or it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I think it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday through Saturday, it's kind of a free for all. Some of the stuff I was actually seeing in different threads, social groups and stuff that I was doing on, posted by one of the unemployment people, said, best time to log in if you really wanted to do that is between 2 and 3 in the morning. So set your alarm, be happy.
Yeah.
For the stimulus, the things that might throw you out, a couple of things that we've heard from clients and a couple of people who've experienced it is if you are that 18, 19-year-old and you're filing your own tax return because you have a summer job or that kind of thing, but your parents still claim you on their tax return, that automatically throws you out. You don't get your $1,200. That throws you out. If you are a non-resident alien, if you have no tax ID number, if you don't have a social security number, if you are in here under a green card program, or you have an ITIN, an individual tax identification number, those are supposed to be allowed for the stimulus payments. If you, let's see, what else? No social security number, no non-resident alien. If you filed a 1040 NR, which is non-resident. So even if you filed, if you're non-resident alien, then you don't qualify. And if you make too much money.
Okay, so let's say one of those applies to me beyond making too much money. And is that where I'm going to the IRS website and entering my payment info there? Or if I hadn't, I guess if I've never filed before, then that's just where I go to the IRS and enter my payment info on their website.
If you've never filed at all, then they recommend that you file right away, just so that they have information on there. There is a part of the website where you can enter your payment information, a tab called non-filers, and you can enter your payment directly, but they don't really know if you made your, too much money. So they were recommending not only do you put your payment information in there, but that you file right away so they know, are you even eligible for that? Mm-hmm. One of the things that they're really concerned about is scams, because, of course, this free money deal and all the IRS's problems in recent years relating to identity theft. And so they said, part of the way to limit the amount of scam is that check by payment tab we just talked about, check my payment tool that you can go on and see that where it is in the process. They also said that they're supposed to be mailing out letters within 2 weeks of sending out those payments. So you should be able to know. So if you get a letter that says, hey, congratulations, Lisa, we gave you your $2,400 and you didn't get the $2,400, then there's a number on there, a special number on there for them to have you call and say, hey, I think I might have got hosed, which, by the way, is a technical tax term.
I think it's written in the law. I've read that
somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
But yeah, if you have otherwise filed, right, 18 and or 19, if you otherwise qualify, there's absolutely nothing that you have to do other than wait for them to get around to you. If you were a Social Security recipient and didn't have to file, there's absolutely nothing that you have to do for them to deposit that money, as long as their bank account information is correct, that they have it. But if they don't, or you haven't filed, then it requires some action on your part.
Got it. So Lisa, what's happening in your world as far as this is concerned, or I know that the lending world has been kind of crazy over the last couple of weeks and months.
Yeah.
What are you seeing today? Because I know it's going to change tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it may change by 4 o'clock this afternoon, so that's
right.
probably something to be aware of. I would say if we're staying on the subject matter of the stimulus payment, and of course that is segueing into next week in regards to employment. One of the biggest things that we're finding right now that we're doing, I have not documented files to the level that I'm documenting them now since 2008. So it's normally in the past, if you go in to qualify to purchase a home, or you go in to to qualify for a refinance, do you have a job, pay stubs, W-2s? And that's about the extent of it. We just need to verify that employment. It's now gotten to the point where we have that conversation with the client ahead of time. What is it that you do? Who is it that you are working for? What has your boss communicated to you in regards to a potential furlough should this go out for another 6 to 8 weeks? Are you considered essential or non-essential due to the state's guidelines? So we're going much deeper in regards to that. I'm having situations where people will be furloughed for 2 weeks, but they then are, going back to work on a set date. So what we're doing is we're encouraging the employer to actually write that letter out. They were furloughed for the last 2 weeks. This is our back to work date. This is what we're planning on doing. I've had people pre-approved for refinances where they are working in what's considered non-essential medical. And so what we did was we included a letter from the employer in the underwriting process saying, yes, this employee currently is furloughed, but when we are allowed to go back to work, they will be going back to work full-time at the same rate of pay. And so these are things that the underwriters need to know, because they're trying to manage all of this from a standpoint of sellability of that file on the secondary market. So employment has become a huge topic, and honestly, probably more important than anything else on the loan application these days.
I've some friends of mine, they received the stimulus. They haven't lost their job. They're still getting full benefits. Let's say they're essential. Now they have this extra $2,500+
right?
Depending on it, if they have kids or dependents.
Mm-hmm.
So is that money that I could then use as a down payment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very easily sourced, especially if you have it direct deposited, right? I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to get a copy of the check, because it's going to say it's coming from the IRS, and it will see that dollar amount, and the underwriter just basically say, hey, this is what this is. And the underwriter is going to understand that that's going to be that stimulus payment, or that's probably not the right term, Tim, but whatever. What's the legal term?
Economic impact payment.
Economic impact. Yes, exactly. So, for a lot of people, this tends to be normally a very busy buying season. People get their tax refunds, they get their $6,000 to $7,000, and they choose oftentimes to use that to purchase a home. So if they're getting their normal tax return and they are still working, of course, that's the key at this point in time. You still want to make sure that you're going to be working at the end of the 30-day escrow, right? And then they get this extra little bump. Now they find themselves in a position where they really do have enough money to use as a down payment. I was talking to a client today, and I said, let's talk about your job, because I want to make sure that I don't have you spend $1,000 on inspections and appraisals and then have you the day before we're supposed to fund, because lenders are calling the day of funding. We're probably not doing same day fundings at this point in time because of some additional things that they're doing in regards to making sure that everyone's still working. I'd hate to have you spend $1,000 and then not be able to close because something happened. So let's have that tough conversation up front. Let's go ahead and make sure. My recommendation, honestly, to any realtors that are on the call that are working with those lenders is make sure that your lenders have your pre-approved buyers. They've gone back and they've made those phone calls and they've had those conversations, because there's been credit score restrictions. There's been programs that we've lost. There's a whole myriad of different things in regards. Fannie Mae is talking about tightening up their guidelines, which we would then see in the automated underwriting system. So someone who was approved 6 weeks ago who hadn't found their house, you need to have your lender go back to that client and reconfirm that approval and have some of these conversations ahead of time so that we don't end up spending people's money and putting them in a worse situation. It would be better to wait until this is over and spend the money and just kind of put your house buying on hold, because that $1,000, if we can actually close your transaction, is going to be money that's much better spent.
Right. Mike Hayes asks, does receiving unemployment or any of these stimulus packages impact your credit score?
Not your credit score, as long as you continue to make your payments. So it will impact your ability to qualify, because of course you're now talking about a reduced income, and you're talking about an income that's not stable or historical. Sometimes you'll have a person who's a seasonal firefighter and they've been doing it for 5 years. And for 5 years, I have historical unemployment income because this is what he does. He works, 8 months out of the year as a firefighter and 5 months out of the year he's on unemployment. And I can prove that history, but we're dealing with reduced income that's not historical. So as long as you can keep your payments up, keep your payments current, you may have to, on those credit cards, step back a bit and make those minimum payments. Just make the minimum payment and your credit score will not be impacted from that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the PPP loan and the EIDL loan are at their very nature a loan. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how that would come around, because there are no payments required, at least between 6 and 12 months for either one of those loan programs. So,
well, and it's also going to be interesting to see how it shows up. Are they going to report it on your credit report? Because it's very rare for me to see commercial loans or business loans on a personal credit report. Huh. And so if I don't have it on your personal credit report, then it's not generally an indication that I have to take care of, because it's assumed that that payment is going to be thrown into how you're calculating your Schedule E or your 1120S payment. Am I correct, Tim? That you would then put that into that. So that would then, I'm not a CPA. That's my favorite line. I'm not a CPA. But then that would then show up as to what your net or your K1 or your bottom line on your Schedule C, because those payments are included in that. So if I threw that at you on a credit report liability, I would be basically double hitting you for that, because you're going to be taking care of that by reducing the amount of taxable income because you're making those payments through the business.
Yeah. And the PPP is supposed to not require any type of personal or corporate guarantee, so that wouldn't show up anywhere. The EIDL loans are supposed to require personal guarantees if the amount's over $200,000.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, this is why we have a CPA on the call.
So, a question that was texted to me, because I guess they're too nervous to put it in the chat box, was they had some confusion around, let's say I made $160,000. So I'm not eligible for the entire 1,200, but I could be eligible for something.
Yep, perfect. So they take that bottom threshold. So under 75 single or 150 individual or married filing joint, you get the whole $1,200. Beyond that, they reduce your $1,200 by $1 for every $5 that you go over. So by the time as a single person you hit that $99,000, then you've zeroed out. Or as a married filing joint couple, when you hit $198,000 that you've zeroed out. So if you're somewhere in between that, every dollar on your adjusted gross income. So a lady called me arguing earlier this week, says, but my taxable income says that I'm, under the threshold. And I said, well, that includes your standard deduction or your itemized deduction, but the measurement is the adjusted gross income. So if your adjusted gross income is over those thresholds, you lose $1 every $5 of income you're over. Good question.
Your adjusted gross income is, just for clarity, what your income is after your standard deduction.
Before your standard deduction.
Before your standard deduction. Okay. I hear you. Now, next question. So I got on the IRS. I'm not saying me, but I use me in the first term a lot because I'm just pretending like I'm them watching. Right?
We know, Jared. We know.
I still didn't get my free 10 grand. Okay, so I get on the IRS website and I look up, I'm trying to look up my status, right? What's my status? And the IRS website says, we can't find you, or we have no status for you. A friend of mine tried this yesterday and that was the response they got. Any insight to what that means? They filed recently. They received a refund last year. Is this just overloading of the system, or?
So there's a couple of different responses. If you go to the Get My Payment tool, there's a couple of different responses. If they don't say, hey, it's on its way, or it's expected to be deposited by the April 17th or something like that, you could get a need more information, which basically says the IRS has looked in their sources and they can't find your bank information, and you got to go through one of the tools to upload your bank information to them. So that's the need more information. They could have a try again later, meaning that your account has been locked. And so either somebody's tried to get on by, mistyping their own social security number and they screwed yours up because they don't have your information. The try again later means somebody, according to the IRS, locked up your account and they've locked it for a period of 24 hours. So you won't be able to do anything for at least another 24 hours. If it says not eligible, then some information they have in their system says that you're automatically thrown out. And I forget what words you actually used.
Honestly, I can't even remember.
So payment status not available is the only one, that the other official one that they're saying.
Okay.
And if payment status is saying payment status not available, either they've decided that for sure that you're not eligible. They've decided that you need to file a tax return in order to be able to be eligible. Or like I said, you filed your tax return within the last 2 weeks and they're still processing it. So it's not able to be pulled up by the tool because it's too recent.
Got it. Okay. So since we're on a little bit of a delay here, let's go back to adjusted gross income. Adjusted gross income is on line 1 of your taxes, correct?
No. Line 1 is wages.
Okay, so your adjusted gross income is, I know you have these forms memorized, right?
I'm going to pull it up so that I don't have to guess.
You could try to guess. I don't know if that would be very helpful.
26.
And part of it is because the 2018 form was different than the 2000. Remember, last year they gave us the postcard. And so we had different line numbers. So on your 2019 tax return, it is line 8B. I feel like I'm calling bingo. So 8B is on your 2019 tax return. On your 2018 tax return, let me pull that one up. So again, I'm not lying to you or giving you false information. On your 2018 tax return, and of course, software takes a little bit, so I'll be 32 seconds. Hum the Jeopardy theme song or something.
My favorite thing.
We could go wash our hands right now, right? Because we're
sing the alphabet song.
This is a moment to wash your hands.
I might pay money to hear Jared sing the alphabet song.
There you go.
No, then you would put me at over 200,000, and I would get that stimulus check.
Form 10.
Technical term.
In 2018, it was the postcard. The front page is just your information, no numbers on it. So On 2018 tax return, it's line 7. On 2019 tax return, it's line 8B.
Okay.
It's 26.
Okay. So then I'm looking at whether I in 2018 or 2019, no matter where I filed, if that is what the IRS is looking at when they say this is what your stimulus payment will be, or whatever the technical term is that I already forgot.
Economic impact payment, but that's the comparison of your income to determine whether or not you're eligible for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to give Lisa a little bit of feedback, line 26 does not exist on the main form on either 18 or 19.
Okay, good to know.
This is
So
why
give me Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you would have been pretty darn close.
Yeah.
For 2017 and prior years, you are right in there.
Okay, good. It's good. I like those tax returns. I knew those tax returns really well.
Yeah.
You got to read those really well.
So, Tim, what have we not talked about on stimulus payments? Because it seems like it's fairly straightforward that if I made a certain amount of money or if I filed my taxes, this is what I should expect, and I should expect it one day in the next 8 weeks.
Let's talk about the most contentious deal. Let's say you don't want it via direct deposit.
Okay.
Because you don't want the Treasury Department to have your bank account information.
Okay.
Now, let me repeat that again. You don't want the Treasury Department to have your bank account information. But let's say you don't. You want it via a check. Then if, in fact, you want it via check, those are supposed to be delayed. And so they're trying to get the direct deposit information out. You may have heard the news story recently that the Treasury Department authorized President Donald Trump to put his name on those checks. I even heard a story from the Deluxe Check Printing Company, who has the contract with the Treasury, that at one point in time he was trying to get his picture on the checks, and they poo-pooed that idea. So no picture of Donald Trump on the checks. They did allow him to put his name on it, but not his signature. So an authorized Treasury person is going to be the one signing, and again, it's facsimile signature, but signing the checks. They're allowing to put his signature on the left-hand side. And so the left-hand side of the check will have Donald Trump's name on the check, and they anticipate that those will not go out until either the end of May or early June at the earliest. So if you're not getting your bank account information in there, that doesn't prohibit you from getting it, but it's going to be significantly delayed.
And so I heard maybe some facetiousness in there about the Treasury Department having your bank information. Couldn't they get that pretty easy if they really wanted that?
You know, it usually comes up in IRS collection cases. I don't want the IRS to know my bank information. I'm like, hey, they are the Treasury Department. They run that whole thing. And so they probably already have it. But you're absolutely right. The question is, let's say, because I know of one client who has a bank account for his car payment and a bank account for his mortgage payment and a bank account for his utility. He must have 27 bank accounts. So even with the resources of the Treasury Department, it's like, where do you want it to go? And so that's part of the reason why the Treasury is asking you to help them out and say, and even on your regular tax return, I think you can have your tax refund deposited into up to 3 separate accounts.
Oh, wow.
And so if you normally did that even too, they go, hey, where do we send it? So it's more of a clarification process and an ease of getting that money to you. They really want this to be a relief payment. And if they spend a bunch of resources, a bunch of time trying to figure out where to go, and then you go, nope, it went into my Wells Fargo account, not into my Bank of America account, or even worse, you just got divorced in early 2020, and it goes into your ex-wife's bank account and not into yours, or whatever. So much the worse. So that's why they really want this kind of feedback to say, hey, tell us what's the right information.
That's an interesting question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go.
Okay. I was just going to ask that question because you have a number of people who their divorce settlements specifically state that this person gets this child this year and this person gets this child this year. And so if the IRS is going back to the last filed return, do they default to the person who claimed the child that year?
So they're looking at 2019 first.
Okay.
So if 2019 was the year that you claimed the child,
Right.
And you filed your tax return, let's say it's more than 2 weeks ago, so that they have clarity of purpose, they will give that extra $500, presuming that they otherwise qualify, to the parent who claimed the child in 2019.
Right.
If in fact you are a procrastinator, and even though you got the child in 2019, you have not yet filed 2019, they will look and they match it up by social security number, right? And so they'll say, all right, that $500 will go to the 18 return if in fact you haven't already filed.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. I just wanted some clarification around that. So.
And then Jared had another thing as he was trying to, elbow you out of the way.
Yeah, so Jared, what was your thing?
I was going to ask, there is not a way for, if I filed my taxes and I've given the Treasury Department my bank account information in the past to deposit my refund, there's no way for me to go in and say, don't direct deposit it, I want a check. They're just going to send you the money, correct?
That's my understanding. I have not, Jared, actually had the question of, I don't want it direct deposited, please send me a check. So if you really wanted Donald Trump's name or, to take a picture of the check, so 20 years from now, you can say, hey, remember 2020? It was wild. Here's a copy of the check. I don't know how you tell the IRS, I don't want direct deposit information. That's a good question.
Okay. I was scouring the IRS's website. I don't think it exists, but since you brought it up, I thought I would at least ask. So anything else? We're going on a little over 45 minutes here. This is the opportunity for people to ask their very last questions if they have any. Is there anything that we didn't cover that we should talk about?
Boy, again, some of this stuff is changing, as we talked about earlier, almost hourly. With regard to the economic impact payments, you have the latest and greatest today. With regard to the PPP and the EIDL programs, we did a update at the very beginning of this. You have as best information as you have available right now. With regard to unemployment, maybe we can do a little teaser for next week, or we kind of alluded to that a little bit easier. But again, a lot of this stuff is changing. Even when we were doing the PPP program, there was a period of time where the SBA form changed 4 times in 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty stable with regard to that stuff now. And of course, the money's all gone. But with regard to that stuff, it's fluid. I've heard so many times in the last month or so these uncertain and unprecedented times. So be aware, pay attention to what's going on around you, because as it changes, it's important to keep up on that to be able to take the best advantage of these programs.
And where are you finding your best resources? At the IRS's website, or do you read certain news blogs, or how are you staying informed on this?
As a CPA, I get updates from both the American Institute, the national organization, as well as our state board. I definitely grab stuff off the IRS. I look at Wall Street Journal and Barron's, and like you said earlier, even reading stuff online through social media or that kind of stuff. With a kind of jaundiced eye, some of that social media stuff. But look at it, says, that, so I might see something new and then jump out. I've learned a lot of stuff about the unemployment stuff. There's a great, social media thread, or a couple of social media threads that I'm a part of that I jump on, and then I'll go and verify it with the Nevada UI side or something like that to make sure that, we have good sourcing. But yeah, it's depending on which program you're talking about, hundreds of sources probably, or at least dozens anyway.
Yeah.
So teaser for next week, Lisa, we're talking about unemployment.
Yep.
And what you can expect for unemployment as an individual, as somebody who is self-employed, as a small business owner. I'm very curious about, this is something that we had talked about on last call about where is this money coming from and how do we expect it to be paid, right? So me as a small business owner, is my unemployment rate all of a sudden going to jump? What's that going to look like? So that's kind of our teaser for next week, correct? Anything else that we should put to that?
Yeah, that is the goal. I know that I do understand that the state has been authorized to fast track over 200 employees to try to help break up the backlog, the log jam that's occurring. And to Tim's point earlier, you had all of those loan applications, and it's the same thing that's going on with the servicers. When we talk about forbearance the last week of the month, that you're sitting on hold for 3 and 4 hours because these systems do not have the manpower during normal times to mandate or to support what it is that we're currently seeing where people need the help. So it's just one of those situations where I know that I had seen that the unemployment office was working on getting some additional people to try to help get that process started, because I think there's obviously a lot of frustration on top of that, but understanding that these people, I have a personal friend who works for the department, and they're working 12 and 15 hours a day, and they're working on the weekends, and they're not seeing their family, and they're driving into work. And so, it's, I know it's hard to have to sit on hold for 4 hours to talk to someone, but again, I think that we need to remember that we're all in this together, and that those people are here giving up their lives with their families and not staying safe from that standpoint. They're out working and going to work. And so, yes, you're frustrated, and yes, things are scary, and yes, you need someone to help you. But I think that we need to remember to be kind to each other through this process, that they're there to implement all of the support for you. And I think that that's a really important thing to try to remember when you're interacting with these people, and be grateful for what they're doing and their hours that they're putting in.
Right. Well, thank you both. I hope you are staying sane during the quarantine. We appreciate everybody watching and your questions and tuning in. We will be back next week, next Thursday, 1 o'clock, where we're going to talk all about unemployment benefits, not only for you if you're unemployed and let's say you work for the casino or for a non-essential business. If you are a real estate agent, a small business owner, we're going to be diving into all of that. So please join us next Thursday at 1 o'clock. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Tim. As always, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
You too.
You too.